This presentation is brought to you by the Belzhansky Foundation. Over 50 years of research towards curing cancer the natural way.
Hello, my name is Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's actually not your fault, it's Alex's fault. It's a private joke between us that I'm like a mitochondria full of energy, and so he accidentally spelled my name like mitochondria with Bhattacharya. You can see it in your book. Today I'm going to talk with you about autoimmune disease and Ayurveda. How many of you have heard of Ayurveda? Oh, wonderful. And how many of you have never heard of Ayurveda? Okay, so since 90% of people have heard of Ayurveda, the ones that haven't, I welcome you to come and find one of the people in the room or me and learn more about it. So the immune system is what we are talking about all day today and tomorrow. It's the theme of the conference. And this week I was approached by someone doing a report on the flu vaccine and immune issues and whether or not people with immune issues should get the flu vaccine. That is not the topic of today's talk. However, I did make a nice comment that they actually included that talked about the immune system and how people vary. And when your immune system is fighting a whole bunch of other things that are going on in the body, for it to turn its attention to a vaccine may create problems. And that is why many people with autoimmune diseases have either wariness or difficulties when they take vaccines. So you can read that in USA Today. I think it was on the 7th. So what connects all traditional medicines? Ayurveda is the traditional medicine of India and the Indian continent, which was once an island before it crashed into the Himalayas or created the Himalayas. It is a traditional medicine that believes in our own inherent power to become stronger and better without the use of pharmaceutical drugs or other agents. What drove this science into occurring or into its full robust flavor that it created over 5,000 years. And by the way, it's the oldest continuously practiced form of medicine on the planet that humankind knows. What drove this science is the power of observation. And so I welcome each of you who is either a caregiver to someone with autoimmune disease or yourself, if you have autoimmune disease, to use your own body as a unique laboratory and watch your own powers of observation. One of the things that Ayurveda says is that when you are less connected between your mind and your body and your senses, your soul can't move in. And when your mind, body, senses, and soul come together and you are fully aware of how hungry you are, when you need to sleep, going to sleep, when you need to poop, going to the bathroom, and not letting the conventions of modern society get in the way, when those things are aligned, you will recover your own health. So what makes a good scientist? Each of you are scientists in your own laboratory. What makes a good scientist is, number one, logic and following what happens rather than being in a state of, okay, well, I want this to happen and it's not happening and I'm going to ignore it and I'm going to pretend like these drugs are working, or I'm going to pretend like this diet is working, or I'm going to pretend like this exercise is good for me even though I feel chronically exhausted. But watching your body. Second is observing your body and seeing what your body does that maybe your friend's body doesn't do. Maybe your friend is great on a keto diet and doing really well and you just aren't. Maybe your friend is great on the old Atkins diet. Maybe your friend is really great on intermittent fasting. There are 20, 30 different diets right now that your friends will be on and say, try this. It's really good for chronic fatigue. It's really good for sarcoidosis. It's really good for lupus. And it's not working on you. So observe your own body and find some tools that work for you. That's why you're here. And tune into nature to find the tools. So what Ayurveda did is it said, if you look at the weather and you look at how the weather behaves in terms of the humidity and the movement of water, because we are about 70% water ourselves inside of our body. If you watch the way fire behaves, we have a fire in our gut, a fire in the belly, as they say. If you watch the way that people, animal people behave, the animals knew how to find cures. If you how many of you have lived on farms? Not too many. Okay, so I grew up on a farm, and when animals would get sick, for example, if a cow had some kind of rash on its side, it would go around, it would sniff. Cows are one of the most picky eaters if they're not fed Dunkin' Donuts and like tin factory farm raised. But if they're out grazing, they'll sniff, and they'll find a plant or a shrub, and they'll go and rub their body against it because they know that that rash is going to be healed by that plant. How do they have that instinctive knowledge? That field is called ScHO, meaning animal, pharma, which means drug or medicinal plant, cognosy, knowledge. So zoopharmacognosy is one of the ways in which medicinal plants first gained their entry into the human understanding of medicine. And Ayurveda uses a lot of herbs. There are a lot of modalities in Ayurveda that include almost everything that is available in most other medical systems, but in an Ayurvedic way. The Ayurvedic way means you don't just take herbs and say this is the medicinal glycoside or flavonoid or chemical in it. It means that you look at the gunas, which are these qualities that we have in our body. So the three main qualities, there are 10, but the three main qualities are how rough versus how smooth you are, how hot versus how cold you are, and how moist versus how dry and rough you are. And those determine how we pick our herbs. If you don't pick your herbs that way, and if you don't have knowledge of herbs, so when I was doing my degree in Ayurveda, which I did after medical school, I went in thinking I'm going to learn the pharmacology, I'm going to learn the drug, I'm going to learn the mechanism of action, what receptor things work on, and I'll know my medicinal herbs. Ayurveda looks at the qualities of those herbs and what they do on the human body, and those are called gunas, and that is how they energetically determine how herbs work. So if you're just going to look at ashwagandha raises energy. It's not going to take you very far. It'll take you a little far, but then if your body has a different set of, let's say, dryness than ashwagandha has, which is very dry, then it's going to make you more dry and going to make you sicker versus making you more moist. So what we do is we put the ashwagandha in ghee or in some olive oil or some sesame oil to warm it up. And then we find that the ashwagandha gives effect. A common other example is turmeric, which has a certain oily and heating property. And what do we add to it? Black pepper, exactly. Everyone knows that. They didn't know that for the first 20 years. And so vitamin supplement producers would come to me and say, you know, we got this really great turmeric extract and somehow it's not working. Because in India, what they do is take turmeric, put it on the stove and cook it. And they usually cook it with other spices, including the heat, and then not always adding black pepper, but adding something like cumin or coriander. So people say, how does Ayurveda work? It's all a bunch of hogwash. And I've heard a lot of people say that to me and challenge me. So my guru always taught me that don't try to teach the people who are challenging about Ayurveda. Let the person take 10 steps toward Ayurveda, and Ayurveda will take 20 steps toward it. So since there are so many of you that already are familiar with Ayurveda, I'll tell you what I've come to learn as a first trained pharmacologist, neuroscientist, lab bench researcher, and then a public health professional working around the world in different cultures to set up public health programs, and then as a medical doctor and a clinician in family medicine, and then as an Ayurvedic physician and scientist. What I've learned is that in modern medicine, we go from nanoparticles to meters, which is a pretty wide range logarithmically. And I don't have a pointer, but think about 10 to the minus 9 to 10 to the 1 or 10, even 10 to the 2. That's how far the human eye can see, and that's how most of the tools work in modern medicine. Ayurveda went from the yota, if you can see at the very bottom, the yota, which is 10 to the minus 24, scale of understanding to the 10 to the plus 24, which is called a yoctometer. 10 to the plus 24 is what? It's like planets, Jupiter and the sun. And so the planetary influences on the body affect us. So for people with very tough diseases, sometimes what we do is we run their astrologic chart, which is called Jyotishi. So some people say that's all hogwash. But if you find a really good Jyotishi, how many of you have ever used a Vedic astrologer and found that it's quite scary how correct it is? So That was something that was availed by Ayurvedic people because it was way at the very large planetary level of subtle influences that can affect our lives. And then at the very minute levels where there are no particles, Avogadro's number is 10 to the minus 23. 10 to the minus 24 is waves. It's not particles. And the wave that is between us that we know is real even though we can't see it is love. Right? Our emotions, our bonding for each other. People travel, and in the next couple of weeks, they're going to travel many, many millions or many, many thousands of miles, just the people in this room, if you calculate, to travel to loved ones. Why? Because we love them, because we want to spend the long weekend with them over Thanksgiving. So that doesn't have a particular or a chemical issue going on. It has a wave issue going on. Ayurveda understood that. I would love to spend the next 2 days explaining doshas and gunas and tattvas with you. The tattvas are those 10 qualities that I talked about already, and the scales, the spectra, and go through what is really dry and rough. This is dry and rough season, and what is moist. So something for each of you to try is to get some sesame oil, rub it under your feet before bed. Let your feet just be open for 5 or 10 minutes, and then go to bed and see how your sleep is. It is one of the things I've used with students and with patients to help ease the insomnia or the trouble falling asleep. Why does it work? Ayurveda says it lowers the dry, rough quality of Vata. So what is Vata? Vata is, now this is going to be the brief version of this, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are 3 kind of principles that rule this universe. They are not material things. You can't go into the body and find a humor, as it's often called, like a liquid flowing through us. That's Vata. Vata is the theme of movement in our body. In the macrocosmic, like when I move my arms, or on a subtle cellular level, like when my haustra of my large intestine are moving constantly to move my colon contents down and out, or my breath, which is tangible but subtle, sometimes more subtle than others. And Vata has the qualities of cold, dry, rough, light, and mobile. And that theme of movement is in the macrocosm and the microcosm of our body. And if that's out of balance, you get more like air and ether, which are the elements that typify Vata, and you become not only dry, but it's actually ruling the things that are the fastest moving in our body, including our nerves, our thoughts, and our circulation, because those are always moving. So anyone with neurologic diseases, psychiatric diseases, colon diseases, joint diseases, issues of the breath, these are all Vata. So what we do is we give Vata pacifying or Vata balancing things. So sesame oil is one, warm soups instead of eating salads this time of year. This time of year is like October to January. Pitta and Kapha, I'm not going to go into so much because I want to talk about a couple of other things with you. If you want to learn how to understand your dosha, come and see me afterwards. I'll be around. But dosha calculations have gone haywire in autoimmune patients. So generally, if you go to a really good Ayurvedic physician, they will not ask you, what is your dosha? What is your dosha type? What they'll do is they'll say, let's use some things because your Vata, your Pitta, and your Kapha have gone a little bit into an imbalanced state where they can't resolve themselves. So there are 3 tools that I want to talk to you about for these last 5 minutes. One is the gunas, finding those things to put into your daily routine, your foods, your sleep routine, your sex routine, if you have one, your clothing that you choose, the way you take your bath, how you move around the city, and look at how you're doing hot versus cold. So try to stay warm or hot during this season. Not hot like as in sweating hot like the summer, but warm. Try to be more snigdha, which is a word for not quite oily, like over oily, but supple oily, right? The way you feel when you have a nice oil on your skin and it's not dry and parched. And try to keep yourself grounded. Remember that CDMLR, cold, dry, light, mobile, rough. The Ojas component I'm going to talk about next is the word for immunity. And the bhasmas, in case I don't get into it, is the medicinal use of metallic ashes. This is actually what I did my PhD on, and I'm saving it for last because it's the most controversial. So The decline of Ojas. What is Ojas? Ojas is that principle of resilience, the optimal vitality. And it's got two components. One is bala, which is strength, and one is vyadi kshamatva. Try saying that. Vyadi kshamatva. It is the ability to avoid and resist diseases that most people with autoimmune disease have lost. Why have they lost it? Because they've lost that ability inside to have coordination, that capacity to fight any kind of disease. I have to put a Sanskrit shloka up there, but this shloka talks about how the decline of Ojas begins with the mind and emotions, and how those emotions basically mess up the neurochemicals in our mind from a young age. Many people with autoimmune diseases have family trauma. They have PTSD from military trauma. They have chemical trauma. They have trauma that has come into their life that they haven't been able to process. So Ojas is that ability to regain, re-optimize that sense of vitality. What we need is not to be younger by age. What we need is to be more vital and more resilient. I'm hoping he's not giving me a signal because I have my timer on.
No. They gave you a signal. You got 3 more minutes.
Okay, I have my timer on. So one of the things we want to do when we want to raise Ojas is the daily routine. The daily routine is known as dinacharya in Ayurveda. And if you haven't heard about the clock genes, they were given the work was given a Nobel Prize 2 years ago, and they talk about how we have a molecular clock inside of our body. And if you time things correctly, your microbes, your hormones, your neurotransmitters, your thyroid gland, and your brain chemicals, including the melatonin, which then talks to your hypothalamus, which produces releasing hormones that talk to your pituitary, which then sends signals throughout your body. If that cascade of chemicals is kept well through a good dinacharya, then your body actually starts to resume normal function. There are many elements to a good daily routine, and if you can follow it, it is really healing. It actually brings people back from disease. So I wrote this book, Everyday Ayurveda, and it's in the corner there. And I've had, it's a bestseller in India. I've had over 1,000 people write to me and tell me that they have these bizarre diseases that have been healed. And I don't know how, following a daily routine, getting up early, scraping your tongue, putting oil on your body before you bathe, eating after you bathe and not before you bathe, and a series of 42 different rituals, of which you probably already do 15 or 16 or so. I know they're going to cut me off, so I'm going to talk about the other 2 things I wanted to say very quickly. One is, make sure you follow your sleep. There are many people that are talking about good sleep. It is one of the cornerstones. So in Ayurveda, your food is a cornerstone. You have 3 chances a day to heal yourself. They're called breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You have 3 chances a day to poison yourself. They are called breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Learn about your nutrition. The second pillar is sleep hygiene, using herbs like Brahmi and Jatamamsi, putting sesame oil, as I mentioned, getting electronics away from your bed, darkening your room completely so that your melatonin and your pineal gland understand that it's nighttime, and having quiet. Ways to increase Ojas: wear gold. So you'll see I'm always wearing gold. These don't come off. Gold is actually a way to improve your immune system. And we know that because if you look at rheumatoid arthritis patients, there's actually a pharmaceutical drug that has gold in it. And it actually works quite well. It's been approved by the FDA. Decrease preservatives in your food and in your medicines. I used to be a big supplement queen. I know one of my friends is Jeffrey Bland, who is the founder of Metagenics and functional medicine. And I used to give a lot of herbs and supplements. And then I realized that those supplements either have methyl cellulose, or they have vegetarian, which is vegetarian, or they have capsules made of gelatin. And so I empty out the capsules. I thank the capsules for measuring. I throw the capsules away, and I eat the supplement. But watch for preservatives. We're not going to have time to talk about heavy metals, but let me just say as I finish that the problem with heavy metals is that what we use in the West is unpurified. In Ayurveda, there was a science called Rasa Shastra, which is what my PhD is in. And I got it because of the heavy metal crisis going on. It looks at how metals since the 8th century have been made into ash form into nanoparticles, which then I have used for the past 5 years to help patients with chronic autoimmune diseases and disease like diabetes and cancers to heal their bodies by replenishing trace minerals and trace metals. And it's not done by just stopping, all metals in the body. It's done by systematically taking out the poison metals and putting in clean metals. And how to clean a metal is what I studied. So on that note, if you do want to reach me, I was going to talk about a bunch of things that I realize other people are going to talk about, so it's fine. The email address, I guess it's on the first one, huh? You can come and find me at the end of the, I'll be outside and get my email address. I thought I had it on the last one, but thank you very much for your time.